Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, March 19th, 2021. And our top stories today, Eastern European countries actually lead the way with defined contribution pension schemes. And how did they react to the COVID pandemic? Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Ziga Vizintin. He is advisor to the management board of Polkodzienicka Druzhba, a pension fund. Ziga, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Pleasure to join.
And I guess I should say good afternoon, really, because it's afternoon in Slovenia. But let's start off, Z, because I think what's underreported oftentimes, and in speaking with you offline, what may be underreported is the fact that the Eastern European states, countries like Slovenia, Latvia, and others, may actually be further ahead than some of their counterparts in Western Europe and the US. What can you tell us about this?
Well, yeah, I think this might be interesting to some because usually when I speak to friends in the US or Japan, Australia, whenever they think of Europe, they think of Germany, Austria, Italy, France. And we know retirement systems there are, I dare to say, quite underdeveloped still. But on the other side, you've got in the so-called emerging Europe, Eastern Europe, you've got a really thriving modern DC retirement plans growing now for more than a generation. Somewhere after 2000, the year 2000, the development really took up. Now you've really got a lively scene that is basically much more up to date than what you have in America than in some Western European countries. So I think this is really interesting, and people should also look to small countries like Slovenia, big countries like Poland, Romania, what is going on here, and maybe just to get a scope of the size, still in emerging Europe, it's more than 100 million people. So it's not all in all, a small population.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I mean to jump in and cut you off. What I think is interesting here is that these I'm just going to brand them as Eastern European countries. No disrespect to anybody, but just to kind of talk about it in a pool. They've adopted auto enrollment, auto escalation. You have target date funds. I mean, it looks very similar to what we're talking about here in the West. Here in the States, for example, or in the UK, but that migration happened a lot quicker. Am I right about that?
True. Basically, here we had an advantage of, we can say, the fresh start effect, because after the socialism in 91 or 90, depending on the countries, basically we needed to start from scratch. And here, Western institutions like IMF and the World Bank really stepped in and helped. And basically, in all countries, designed various systems based on what was then known to be the best in the West. So that's why the pension plans here were designed from the start to really be modern, private, defined contribution, in most cases, retirement plans, with later introduction of now you have everywhere life cycle funds, you've got variable annuities to draw down, you've also got auto escalation. So basically, we didn't have this kind of discussion and big reforms, because every time you have pension reform, it's really tough because you have many stakeholders together. Here, basically, it needed to be designed from scratch. And luckily, a really modern design was put in place. And now we have, let's say, in Slovenia from the year 2000, we are now in our 20th year. We really have a modern pension fund, which for, let's say, I work for one, with services that are similar to funds in the States.
Z, what about the reaction of individuals? Maybe they were under the former communism, socialism, communism, however you want to brand it. But how have they taken to this privatized defined contribution model? Are they contributing at similar rates to, let's say, in the US where we have auto enrollment, or in the UK where there's auto enrollment, people contributing at rates to give them a full, or at least close to a full funding in retirement?
It's really a big difference by generation, because the older generation that really grew up or lived in socialism for 40, 50 years, basically they still don't contribute enough on their own, because they still have, now it's breaking every year, this myth that the government will provide for everything. Because this was, I could say, the mantra for 50 years, you know. Of course, you didn't have to save for retirement on your own, because the government will provide for it. So this all changed in 91, in 90, and some people needed longer than others to adapt, but the younger generations were quite quick, just because they saw how the previous system crumbled. They basically really saw that, okay, I need savings on my own to cover my healthcare, to cover my other retirement costs. So it's more of a generation thing, but I have to say this perception is changing every year. In the first 10 years, it was more slow because people were still used to the old ways. But nowadays, basically, I think the attitudes are similar to somebody in Germany or in UK or in America. So also the contribution rates are going up, and also people every year also individually contribute more and more.
Ziga, what about things that the system could do better? No system is perfect. I know when you start from scratch within a generation, you have the ability to pick and choose. But there are things that could be done better. Here in the States, as you know, we're talking about retirement income. We're talking about coverage for people that don't have access. There are many small employers that don't have access to or don't have retirement plans. What are some of the things that people in Slovenia and the other Eastern European countries are thinking about to improve their systems?
For sure. Now, I think after 20 years of development, it's really clear that some systems worked better than others. Let's say in Slovenia, we have voluntary enrollment in the second pension pillar. So we are now similar as in States to 50-60% of employees are enrolled. You have other countries that followed a different path, like let's say our neighboring Croatia. They had mandatory enrollment. So now they've reached basically universal coverage with like more than 80%, 80 to 90% of employees are enrolled. And they've got now assets, almost 30% of their GDP are their private retirement assets. In Slovenia, for comparison, we're only at a little below 6%. So in Eastern Europe, you've got now many cases. I've also sent you a few stats where you clearly see that the design of mandatory enrollment was really much better, worked really much better. Sorry about that.
Obviously, your dog agrees as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I think somebody ran a bell.
That's okay.
And yeah.
That's okay. That's fine. Well, Ziga, I want to take a really quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to Ziga and possibly his dog more about Eastern European countries' defined contribution plans, and then we'll talk about the impact of the COVID pandemic on these plans. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and called Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Ziga Vizintin. He's advisor to the management board of Pokojeniska Druzhba A Pension Fund. Ziga, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into maybe the reaction of the impact of the pandemic, I want to ask you about one of the things that we've been kind of wrestling with or dealing with here in the States is interacting with participants or members of these plans and doing it effectively and doing it in a unique way using things like behavioral finance. What are some of the tactics or things that plan sponsors, employers are thinking about when they're engaging with their employees about saving?
It's an area that I really think personally is one of the most important, because employers have, I think, here the main role to play. Of course, also the plan designers, but the employers are really a key element here, because in Eastern Europe, the majority of people the majority of the contributions are paid by employers. So employers are here a really key element. And I think it all goes down to how it's communicated. What are the small things like the web portals? How can you basically increase to get people to save a bit on your own? And I think the whole design of the system needs to be done in a way of an auto-enrollment. This change we also had in Slovenia a few years ago. It's not universal auto-enrollment that everybody needs to have it, but in an individual employer, if he decides to have a pension plan, a corporate pension plan, 10 years ago, people needed to sign entry forms. I will enroll in the plan, fill out everything, and so on and so on. Now, when we had the change, basically all employees are automatically enrolled and they don't have to do anything. Only the ones who don't wish to be enrolled have to sign a certain form. So basically, this thing alone means a difference between 50% enrollment rate or 90%. So I think really these big systemic things need to happen, need to be implemented, because I think this gives the biggest gains. And then it's, I think, also important investment, how basically employees invest their funds. Here, I think it's really important to have smart default life cycle funds or target date funds. So we see from our experience, normal employees don't like to deal very much with the pension fund, don't like to make complex choices. Nobody does like to make complex choices, where to invest, how. So the default choice is really important, and it needs to be designed according to an age of an individual member. So it's totally different from somebody young and different for somebody aged 60. So this we also have now implemented a few years ago, and we really see 90% of our members go for the default option. So I think setting smart defaults and paying much attention to this is really important.
Yeah, that set it and forget it really seems to work well, gets people engaged. Sounds like it's very similar to the experience here in the States. Let's change gears slightly, talk about the pandemic. I imagine that the Eastern European countries, Slovenia, Croatia, others, impacted as much economically by the pandemic, but also what was the impact to retirement plans? Did you see participants take withdrawals from their from their plans, as an example?
Very interesting. In our case, I can say basically we had minimum influence of COVID on our business in the last year. Basically, we had no withdrawals, partly because the government help was quite intense. So basically, we had no withdrawals from our fund. And also, we basically had no corporate companies who pay. We also didn't have almost no company that stopped paying. So basically, we had in our fund a record last year. And interestingly, we also had the record of new individual savers. This is something I also observed in other countries because people couldn't spend that much because of the lockdowns, and saving rates went through the roof in some cases. And also part of this went to pension funds. So all in all, despite the COVID pandemic, we had a great year. And yeah, this was the influence. Basically, I can say minimum influence on our business.
And in terms of opening back up, are things, now with the vaccine, people starting to get the vaccine in and around the world, are things potentially opening back up, returning back to some level of whatever normal is going to look like under this in this new world?
Yes, in some regions of Slovenia, you can already get a beer at a bar outside on the terrace. So things are returning to normal. Of course, it's different region to region, but schools are open now for more than a month for everybody. Schools, kindergartens, also high schools. All retail is open with some limitations. So basically, life is here returning to normal. We are quite high also on the vaccines. So we expect by summer that things will normalize.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed that the same thing happens to other places around the globe. People get back to normal and can start saving and building up those emergency savings funds, which are so important. Ziga Vizintin, it is a pleasure to chat with you as always, and look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
We'll be happy to come, and really thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ziga. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, and our website. We're back again tomorrow for our weekly show, BRN Weekly. We'll be taking a look at some of our best segments for the week, and of course, having a very special guest. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.